So hello and welcome back to the channel. And in today's episode, we will discuss the basic operations you can do on a file with Node.js. And what I mean by basic operations is actually the CRUD operations, meaning create, read, update, and delete, right? And I believe this is the first time where you can see us using some kind of file to store our data. Of course, it would be way better actually to use something like a database, but we're just not there yet. Of course, we'll discuss this subject in the future episodes. So as you can see on my screen, again, I will bump it up maybe a little bit. What we have here is a JSON file. And of course, JSON is being the main format used to exchange data in the programming world. We'll be working with that instead of, for example, I don't know, TXT files or XML format, which is a little bit outdated if you ask me. So moving ahead, the topic with the theme of our game shop, I have 3 games stored here. And what I would like to do is to prepare a few basic functions to manipulate that file from within our Node.js app. So as you can see, this is just an array of objects with 3 properties, the name being a string, price being number, and ID being the unique identifier. So I will create a new file and I will call it file operations.ts. Okay, and here we'll have all of our logic regarding the operations we can do on this file. So let's start by actually creating the interface. And interface is a construct which allows you to describe the shape of given object. And if I can just split this, you can see that I have name, price, and ID. So I call this game, right? And I will tell that it should have a string as a name, price is a number, of course, and then we have ID, which is string. Okay. 2 basic operations that I'm gonna need are read and write operations. Of course, you can get these from FS promises, and just to remind you, I am running Node 14.13.1 and I'm gonna import read and write here. Okay, so let's start with the most basic operation you can imagine is we'd like to get the whole list of the games. So basically the whole content of our games list file, right? So I'll export maybe that here. We don't need to view that. Yet also my space doesn't click sometimes. And this is going to be asynchronous function. And this is a great example of one of the use of the promises and asynchronous actions, because we don't know how long it's going to take to access the file, right? the file may be very big. Therefore, the reading operations might take very long. And we're not really interested into knowing how long it's going to take. We just want to be informed whether it was read and what's inside the file, right? So that's going to be a promise. And let's see. I can just get my buffer from the file. I'm going to await read file. And read file takes a path. As you can see, this is shown to us thanks to TypeScript. And this is going to be games list.json. One quick reminder, just see that the games list file is outside of the SRC. So this path is being resolved against the root of your project, not against the location of the file where you're writing your code. And I believe the second is the option. I'm going to just pass the encoding to be UTF-8. And then this should be a string. I'm not really interested in the string itself. I'm more interested in the JSON structure so that I can use it as a standard JavaScript object in my program. So I'm going to do JSON parse buffer. Also promise, as you can see here, is a generic type. So I have to additionally specify what's going to be inside of the promise. And this is going to be a game array. This should be fine. However, of course, I need to add my beautiful, wonderful arrow. Okay, let's see where we can actually do something with that. I'm gonna get rid of that thing, and this doesn't interest me anymore. So let's just run console log get all from the file operations. And with that, let's go npm start. Something went terribly wrong. No such file. NodeJS TS games list. Oh, there's a typo. It's gonna be game list. Do it again. The promise is pending. Well, of course it's pending because we need to do actually. Let's create a variable games list here and let's await for. We need to wait for our promise to resolve, because in other way we'll get the pending promise as it returns immediately. And now finally we have our list. Beautiful. All I wanted. The next thing to do in our operations is to get the game by ID. So we're passing an ID as an argument to a function, and it will return the one single game that I'm interested in. So let's do, yeah, sometimes my space won't register, sometimes it will like hit twice. Let's change my keyboard. Again, this is gonna be rather simple. This is gonna be function that takes a string, and as I mentioned, it should return a single game. Okay, so how to do that? If you were to work with something like a database or a ORM, right? We could just write some kind of query to our database just to query for that one single entry. Well, we're working with a file here, so it's a little bit different, but we can work with what we have already, meaning I will get full list of our games by using our function getAll, and in that list that I got, I will find the one game that I'm interested in by ID. And if you take a look at it, it states that the type is game. But actually, this is not 100% true, because someone might have, by mistake, passed an ID that does not exist in our list. For example, I don't know, Hunt for Hunt Showdown game, okay? And this entry won't match anything in our list. So we have actually to check for that case. So if there is a game, we just return a game. If there is not, we'll throw new error. Let's say, let's use ticks, but there no game with ID. Okay, let's see how that one works. So in here, let's start by calling await get by ID. We'll use EFT. Should be there as Escape from Tarkov. Wonderful game if you really want to hate yourself. Very hard. Let's go. And as you can see here, this works perfectly. What about if we call for something that does not exist? There should be an error. Yes. Error. There's no game with ID Hunt. Wonderful. Exactly what we wanted. Okay. So since we're missing that hand game, let's write a function to add a game to our storage, to our file. So it's gonna be add, and we're forcing you to pass a full game object here. And again, if we had a connection to the database or an ORM, we could just perform some kind of add operation on the database, insert operation to the table, but we don't have that. So we need to take all of our lists from get all method, and then we need to write to our file, given the path, the data, and as you can see, maybe you cannot, the data being a string or array. So definitely we need to use JSON stringify to turn our object into a string. We need to maintain what we had in a list previously, and then add our game at the end. And that should basically be it. So let's try that. Await add, and you can find it. Now we have, thanks to TypeScript, information about the string being not compatible with the game. And we can fix that by adding all necessary properties to our object. The name is going to be and go down, and the price we're going for is, let's say, 55. It won't return anything, but let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah. So we messed up the name of the file. Okay, this can go. Try this again. Okay, and now oh, there's a typo. Of course there is. Game list. Come on. With that done, we should format this now. Good to go. Right? Wonderful. The order of the properties really doesn't matter, so I'm gonna fight about it. Okay. Since we like to add, there's a need to remove naturally. Again, what we have to do to remove from our file, from our list, is to take the whole list, filter out the stuff that we'd like to remove by ID, and then write to the file again. Okay? So let's do move by ID, and this is gonna be ID in a string. Okay, then there's a games list. This is gonna be get all, of course, and then we have to maintain the list and remove the one thing that we'd like to remove. So that's gonna be filter. Given a game, return only the games where ID does not match the ID we'd like to remove, right? So here, if I would do this, that would give us the array of games that have given ID, right? To negate that, it will give us the array of games that don't have given ID, right? Meaning if the ID is degone, our list will look like this, because that one is being filtered out by given ID. And then basically we need to write that into a file. And that should be good. So let's try that. Await remove by ID. Let's remove degone. Okay. And now, yeah, it's being removed. Wonderful. So the one last operation that we need here is we'd like to be able to update the game in a list and write it back to a file. So what do we need here is a little bit trickier, because I don't want to force the user to pass the whole game that he'd like to update. I have to have an ID to find the game in a list that I'd like to update. But the update itself can be done for the name, for the price, or for both, right? So what do we need actually for that is to change our type a little bit, and I will pass up partial game. Okay, and what does it mean? This feels a little cryptic. Thankfully, the description helps us a little bit. It makes all properties in the T, so in our game, optional, meaning they can, but they don't have to be there, right? But I will force the check for ID since I know I have to have it to find one thing in our list. So let me do it like this. We'll check for game ID and we'll do an early return, meaning I'm not checking whether this exists. I will check whether it does not exist. If not, throw new error. You need to pass an ID. Okay. Now we need to find our game to update. So I will base it on the things that we have already. This should give us the game we'd like to update. Then we actually have to perform the update. So I will spread the game to update and then use what was passed to a game to override it. One thing that may be a problem here, could be, but shouldn't be really, is someone could pass a different ID, right? But that should not happen because that get by ID is gonna throw us an error if we can find a game with given ID. So we should be good here, right? So this means copy everything that was in that object, but also override it with the stuff that user passed as a game. Okay. Then we remove the old game from the list, right? And then we add updated game to our list, right? So there are 3 operations that we have to do here: find a game, remove the old game, and add new game. One might think, why won't you use the append file? Because there's an option to do that. It would work really good if the format of our file would be txt. But since we're working with JSON, and you should always work with JSON, that has a given structure, right, of the enclosing tags, right? If I would use append file, my file would look like this after adding a new game. After adding or updating the game. Therefore, we have to be very strict and conscious about our file operations. So let's check where this works. Let's see, update. We need an ID that exists. We need a name. Let's call it EFT is so hard. And that should be it, especially if we wrap it in a object. So one thing to note here, as you can see, I'm not changing the price. The price 70 should stay the same after we run this code. Okay, and let's see. Let's format, and it is updated. And if I change it to a new price, let's see, 75 instead of 70, can run it, and magically, excuse me, sir, be updated. Yeah, now it is, yeah, it's 75. Okay, so 25 minutes, I believe we can finish here. This is how you can handle basic CRUD operations in Node.js file with TypeScript and a JSON file. And in the next episode, I will try to focus on passing the arguments from to your program from the command line. So of course, like, subscribe, share, comment. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of Cyber Potato. Oh yeah, bye.